Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to paint this landscape using the Maya watercolor paint. I keep wanting to say Maya Himi because that's the gouache. I think it's the same company, but we're going to start with that. And first thing I'm going to do is just take, actually this is the pencil that came in it, I'm just going to like roughly sketch in kind of some rocks here in the front. I love to paint birch trees with rocks. I just think it's just so pretty. I love painting rocks. So I just really just very lightly sketched a rock there. Now I'm going to take some tape and I'm going to tear it so you can have a nice rough edge birch tree. I love this technique for doing birches. Save all those little pieces because they will be handy. I want to get rid of flat edges if I can. And go ahead and tape right over the rocks because we're going to just build up. We'll cut that off in a second. We'll cut the tape off. You want to make sure you're using a paper that can handle the masking tape. Sometimes they do well and sometimes they don't. I'm going to tear another piece so I can have a rough edge on the other side. And you're also going to make sure you go and you press down the edges of your tape so that you don't have your paint seeping through. There, I think those two trees will work out really well. I could put a third one in if I wanted to, but I think two is fine. Now I'm going to press it down well, and I'm going to take my X-Acto knife that is residing somewhere on my table. Here we go. And I can see through the tape enough that I'm just going to slice through the tape where it meets the rock. And I can just pull off the excess. This is Hahnemühle Harmony watercolor paper. You can use whatever brand you like. And you can save, this for like another tree or something. I usually keep them stuck to the edge of my table so I can make a bookmark or something. It's just a fun technique to practice. I love doing projects like this, especially if I'm just kind of trying out a new watercolor, because it's a great way to kind of get used to it. So the colors we're going to use are like a kind of cerulean or sky blue. We're going to use a Payne's Gray or Indigo or Indothrone Blue, whichever one you have. Payne's Gray is a good one. We're going to use mauve, or mauve, however you like to say it, burnt umber, yellow ochre, and sap green. I'm going to start with that the cerulean or sky blue, depending on what your set calls it. I'm going to be using common names. I'm not sure what the actual names are in the Maya set. I'm going to bring that color down. This is nice for skies because it's very soft. It's a very soft paint. I don't know if I have the review up for this paint yet. I have filmed it. I filmed it this morning. But I never know, I think this video is going to go up before the review. But I will say that I do really like this paint. I do recommend it. So if you were looking for an inexpensive paint to get started with, this is a good bet. It's very similar in quality to Winsor Newton Cotman. And it does seem to be, the texture's a little bit different than the Pretty Excellent, but I would say it's comparable quality. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of the Payne's Gray. I'm going to mix it with a sky blue color. We're going to get a nice little stream in there. This is just an imagination landscape. When I go walking, I try to pay attention to like rocks and trees and try to get some ideas of how paintings I want to do. So I'm just going to put in a little bit of a lake at the base of the sky. It's okay if it feathers a little bit. And I'm just going to use a chisel edge of my brush so I can get some sparkle in the water. Bring it down like that. You can do more blue if you want. This is a Creative Mark Mimic brush. The round brush that comes with this is really nice, but I just needed a bigger brush for this. You could also use this technique for palm trees if you wanted to. And I think I'm also just going to soften that edge up to the rocks just to make it easier if I decide I want to do something else there. I can have a nice soft edge. And let me wipe off my brush and just make sure I don't get any backgrounds there. Just want a soft, kind of fading into nothing. If I'm doing imaginary landscapes, I try not to keep my edges, I try to keep my edges really soft so that I have that ability to, you know, to not have to, you know, be stuck or committed to anything. So I'm going to make kind of a hazy purple. I'm going to still mix into that same well. I'm going to grab a little bit of mauve or mauve. These are not chalky at all, which is nice. Now the sky is still a little damp, so I should be able to go in there and get a little bit of soft blending into the sky. I think I need a little more mauve in there. You know, you notice some words you just don't say out loud very much, and so like when you go to say them, it's like, oh, I don't know, I've never said that word out loud. It's like hyperbole. That's a word you read a lot, and then it does not look the way it's written. I like this because it looks like a little mist. I'm going to leave that just as it is. I like that mistiness. Now I do have a little bit of a more hard edge than I planned to, but I don't know, maybe I'll just kind of run over it, soften it a little bit. There we go. I'm going to leave that be. I think that looks nice, little fog, a little smoke on the water. All right, now I'm going to grab a little bit of our burnt umber. The only negative to this set is there's no mixing area, so you do need a plate or something to mix into. But other than that, I mean, I think it's pretty good. I think it's a pretty good set. A little dirt on our shoreline. I like to bring that right into the wet water. Also going to get some, sap green. Did I mention sap green? I'm going to add some of that in there too. And then I'm going to grab a liner brush and actually flick up some of that color. You can use any liner or rigger you want. And we're going to cover up a lot of that, brown, but it's nice to have it there because it just gives us in case we don't cover it up, it gives us a little bit of a spot, just a little bit of a fill-in area, but it's not so bold that it like impedes our grass. It doesn't like give us a weird line or anything. Actually, I think I might use two brushes here. Use one for applying color and one for dragging it up. Now I can keep my contour of the trees, of the rock, rather good. I love these little scenes, like you've just been hiking and you've come out at a little lake or pond. This brush actually that comes with a set has a nice point, so you could do this with the brush that comes with a set too. Just use a feather touch on it. Also want to put some reeds in there. I'm going to grab some yellow ochre, mix it with the sap green, do some reeds. Reeds in the water, right at the water's edge. cattails. Well, hopefully I didn't get my head in the shot. Gotta watch out for that. I was doing a live stream last week and I feel like my head was in the shot so much. Not in the shot, but you could see it like in the corner. So awkward. All right, now I'm just gonna put little cattails on our reeds. They're just like, think of corn dogs. That's how they remind me of corn dogs. I would always bring cattails into the library when I would do my my kids' classes, and we call them corn dog plants. And they would get a kick out of that. And if you can make art fun for kids, I think that's like so important. I'll put a couple tiny ones over here for scale, because they're further away, so we want them to be smaller because they're going down the path. There's been so many ducks around. It's been kind of rainy, and we've had a couple, a male and female mallard that's been hanging around. It's gone under the feeders and gotten some bird seeds, which I'm like, or maybe they're going after worms. I don't know. I wouldn't think a duck could pick up seeds in its bill, but they've been hanging out under our feeders and under our neighbors' feeders. Driving my dog absolutely nuts because they don't come out until the dog's in, and then the dog will look out the living room window and just be like totally incensed that those ducks dare to come into her yard. Break the horizon line whenever you can. It kind of helps. I don't know, it just looks good. Okay, now we can have the fun part. We can paint some rocks. We're getting our background stuff done. Let's see, our sky's pretty dry. Actually, before we paint our rocks, let's grab, I keep a toothbrush with my painting stash for doing landscapes because I love this technique for trees. Ooh, I'm gonna load up my toothbrush right into the sap green pan. Okay, and then I'm gonna point in the direction I want the leaves, and I'm just going to drag my finger across. And it's a great way to get those tiny little spring buds. Because it's spring and I got my swatch. Because it's spring and I want it to look kind of springy. And then I am going to use, you can use whatever flat brush you want. Actually, I'm going to go this bigger, this sloppier flat brush, because I don't want to be too fussy. And we're going to use a bunch of different colors here. I think a mistake that people make when they paint rocks is they want to paint them gray. And rocks are going to reflect all sorts of colors. There's so many colors in them. So I like to start with like a yellow ochre. And then grab some of that mauve. That's a strong color, so maybe make sure it's not too... Make sure it's not too bold. These warmer tones are going to pull the rocks forward a little bit too. And I'm going to get some of that blue, that cerulean or sky blue in there as well. And see how it starts to neutralize, because we've got primaries. You've got red, yellow, blue essentially. That mauve is very much a red, the yellow ochre is a yellow, and these ceruleans a blue. It's a great way to use different primaries. It's a wonderful way to get a really nice, I don't know, just a different way of looking at things. Now I need my credit card scraper. I was actually painting at my fun art desk this weekend, so I'm so happy I did that. And I didn't have a credit card scraper. I'm like, how do I not have a credit card scraper up here? And so I'm just scraping. I'm scraping up some highlights. I am making some cracks in the rocks. Now I'm just going to blot here and there. And let that dry a little bit. Now I like to go in with a firmer brush that doesn't hold so much water and grab some Payne's Gray. And now I can start to add some shadows in the nooks and crannies. Add some browns into the Payne's Gray. You can add more scrapings. Your credit card scraper can be used like on its edge as like a squeegee. And give you some beautiful highlights, and you can use it to add the cracks and stuff. Cracks and scrapes, and those will show up more as things dry. I'm going to do a little mauve and Payne's Gray and get like a nice dark purpley color here and there. I love to see how the rocks turn out, you know, because it's always a little bit of a surprise. You know, it's like, how is that pile of rocks going to be different than the last pile of rocks I painted? Be careful around the grass area. It's probably still a little bit wet. And we can go in after it dries and add more, so don't worry if it feels a little too muted. It's a process. Rocks are a process. Everything's a process, isn't it? All right, we're going to dry this. The only time I would recommend not using the heat gun is if you had a really granulating sky and you don't want you don't want to lose that granulation. All right, we're going to remove the tape from our trees, and I didn't mention it at the beginning of the video, but it's important you put the tree tape on last because you'll want to be able to keep your pretty white border if you decide to tape off a border. You don't have to. I mean, I'm on a block, so I mean, I didn't really have to, but I do like to see that beautiful white border when I'm all done. But of course, you know, it's just kind of for looks on a block. If you're taping down a single sheet of paper, though, then you would definitely want to do that. So I know this looks really bizarre to have those really, really bright lines. But it'll be fine, so don't worry. Trust me, it'll be fine. Okay, so we're going to put some color on our tree, and I love to do bits of the mauve. I'm going to say it like both ways the entire video. Some of the yellow ochre. You can mix them together to make a pretty kind of like salmon color. Birches have that kind of tone to them. And it's just really pretty. I think it's nice when you can get some of those colors in there. Half expecting my cat to walk across my table. She decided to hang out in here with me. Just gonna make sure she stays away from the paint water. Any of the colors that you've used so far can go into the bark just in little doses. The burnt umber with little mauve would be real pretty too. I know it's mauve, okay? So you don't have to comment. It's pronounced. Or there's probably already been comments. Although some words have different pronunciations depending on where you're from that are generally acceptable. Go real light with the colors in here, though. They should be picking up on the landscape but not really competing with it, so just really light tones. And I would just do more of the mauves and yellows, because mauves, good lord, because that will bring them forward a little bit. It'll give us a little bit of texture in those guys as well. And then we're going to need to do some shading on the tree. And there's a couple ways you could do it. You can either wet the tree again and then could just color on the edges and let it seep through, or you can do side loading. So you can think about that for a few minutes while we work on our little rockies down here. Grab a little bit of Payne's Gray, a little more mauve. Just putting in some shadows. Tap off extra water. I don't want too much water on this layer. Just a little bit more yellow there. I think that's good. And then also I'm going to take actually I'll mix the color with another brush because these are not the best colors, not the best brushes for mixing color. I'm going to take the burnt umber. I'm going to take the Payne's Gray. Make a dark color there for just some branches. You can even put some yellow ochre and some mauve in there. Get that little bit of a reddy tone to it that you see in a lot of those branches in the spring. And yes, I could just grab red. There's plenty of colors in here, but I think it looks better when you have a limited palette. And it just kind of shows you the quality of the paint if you can mix from a limited palette. All right. Something I could do actually is I could throw some tape. Helps just define an area a little bit. Okay, I think our trees are dry enough to do some side loading. I'm going to start with a wet brush, clean wet brush. Just going to kind of blot the water off the ferrule because I'm going to go from the dry paint here. I'm going to test it on my tape. And actually I'm going to do this side of the tree first because I think that's the side I'm going to want a little darker. I think the sun's over there a little bit more, it seems. And I start at the bottom and work my way up, and then I'll blend back down if I need to because that will give me a little more paint on the bottom of the tree. Might just do one side. I'm going to clean my brush off again because it did migrate a little bit over the well. Do my little test. And we'll do on the side. I think I'm going to actually turn it. It's a little bit easier for me to, because I'm right-handed, it's easier for me to paint the left side of things. Now we do want a little bit of shadow on the opposite side as well, but just not as much. So, just to give it that round feeling, it just kind of brings it, gives it a little bit more depth and dimension. This tape, I put too much on there, and it's sticking. I got to clean that. I let my paint migrate too much. Just a blush of color on that side. You could even do more. I mean, honestly, I think I'll mix a little brown in there if I want to do a little bit more though, because I don't want it so blue. While it's still wet, you can dab it in there, just let it kind of float. I'm just going to throw some streaky and now I can go back in with my credit card scraper. Anywhere it's dry, wet. I'm kind of scrape a little bit. Can't do too much unless you got some paint there because it won't show. And then while there's still like some damp spots, I'm going to go in. I'll just use my liner actually. So I've got some different colors on here. I'm just going to go in and throw some of the, I don't know if I like the liner for this really. I like a random line, so the liner can help me get that bit of random. Scrape to get the markings of the paper birch. I generally find random looks a little bit better. That's one of the reasons I'll use different edges of the credit card scraper. You can use that to apply your paint as well. Alright, so now I'm going to make some branches. I'm going to take the Payne's Gray and some of that brown mix. Birch trees have dark, skinny little branches. They might split, you might get a little bit of a larger white branch, but typically they're kind of like just kind of skinny and dark. I like to lay on the ground in the summer and look up at the birches by the water. So relaxing. It's what makes, you know, suffering through the Maine winters worth it. If it seems too dark, just grab a little bit more burnt umber. Usually their branches are up high. I wouldn't do too many close to the ground. Usually don't have too many branches close to the ground. It's mostly up high. I've probably gone a little too low. And I'm going to take some sap green. And I'm going to do some grasses right in front of the trees. Right up against the rocks. I'm going to try not to get it on the rocks. You can stick a piece of tape down if you want to. Can be a little hard to control with a liner brush because the bristles are so long and floppy. You can even put a few little grasses in front of the rocks if you want to as well. Helps frame the painting out. Try to get some long ones. If you do that, they'll bring them right up, so you kind of got them nestled in a little grove there. Little grassy grove. Alright, now I'm going to do some yellow ochre and sap green together and make myself a lighter, more opaque green. And I'm going to dab some leaves around those little branches that we made, and dab some in front of the tree too, because you wouldn't just have leaves and branches on either side of the tree, you'd have them all the way around the circumference of the tree. And the spattering that we did, it just gives the impression of smaller branches further away. And this is how you paint a springy little scene. Well, it might be summery. I guess cattails. I don't know if the cattails aren't really blooming this early. Put pussy willows or catkins in there. But there, I think that's pretty. Let's give it a dry and then we can remove our tape. And also, I always love to dry it right before I take the tape off anyway, because the tape will be less likely to rip your paper if you heat it up beforehand. So just giving and also if your paper's at all wet, your tape is more likely to pull and to rip it. So it's just a really good idea to dry it. This is a heat tool. It's meant for like stampers to use to emboss, but it's really good for drying your paper because it's really quick. Hair dryer will work just fine. Don't use this for acrylics though, because it's too hot. You could blister your paint. You don't want to use a hair dryer for acrylics. All right, let's see how this turned out. I'm very excited to see. Now that I've stuck my tape over the edges, and I always get attached to brushes when I do that. This is my favorite part. I mean, I love the painting, but this is definitely my favorite part, is the reveal. I did rip the paper a little bit in the corner. Also, pulling the tape at an angle is helpful too, at an angle, like right off the edge. For some reason, I think it just reduces the tension on the paper. It has like less, I don't know, it just seems to work. All right, oh, isn't this sweet? That's a sweet little scene. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you give it a try. It's very easy. And you can use whatever watercolors you have. I will link these down below if you want to pick these up. They are a great value if you are in need of some inexpensive watercolors. Thank you so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up before you go. Until next time, happy crafting.